I know a ton of amazing producers that make some of the greatest beats and can't play a keyboard to save their lives, or any musical instrument for that matter. Some people are just naturally good at music. If you're like me and you're not naturally just amazing at music, this video might help. Let's talk some more advanced chords to make your beats more interesting. What's going down? Of course, there's this whole conversation going on in the producer community that I don't think is ever going to end, which is a debate as to whether or not beat makers and producers should know music theory. I don't want to have that conversation, but what I do believe is that we all benefit from expanding our horizons and learning more. So what I want to bring you today is a tutorial with an amazing keyboard player, producer by the name of Stack Trace. He's a friend of mine. You've probably seen him on my channel before. We work together a lot, and he's going to break down some super dope chords and chord theory for you so that you can start making your chords more interesting and incorporating that into your beats. This video is from a session on musicentrepreneur.com's Beat Club. I'd obviously love to see all of you join. Either way, here's his full 25-minute tutorial on chord theory for beat makers. Can you apply that? Let's say you're starting from scratch, right? Let's just say you're starting with a C minor chord, right? Create for us a 4-chord turnaround that's a little interesting based on all of the theory that you just explained, but in practice in a completely original chord progression.
Okay. Yeah, so let me pull that up again. So you said C minor. So this is also good from a songwriting point of view. Let's say you're working with a singer, and the singer says, you know, I want to do this in C minor. So you need to know what C minor is. Well, you're starting on the C, and you're playing the C minor scale. Right. So she's an R&B singer, let's say, and she wants to do an R&B chord progression. So maybe I would start out with something like this, or maybe this chord. So I mentioned earlier, the reason that I tend to go for those kinds of chords is because I'm always looking for a way to put the minor second, that dissonance, in the middle of the chord somehow. So this is basically the middle. It's not the true middle, but it's the only place that I could put a minor second where it makes sense. I couldn't do this. That doesn't sound right. I couldn't do this, right? So if I take that C minor scale, the second element and the third element put together make that dissonance, which gives this chord a lot of flavor. Especially when you walk it up like that, you can make it ring. So maybe on this one, I would do like the 1 chord, the C chord, and maybe go to an F minor chord next, and then I'd probably do something like that. So another thing that I pointed out earlier is, like, the roots of this music is jazz, blues, mostly blues, and churches, gospel music. So I was fortunate to go to a high school that had a really good music program, and there was a guy there, one of my classmates, that couldn't read a single piece of music, but could play his ass off on the piano, and it was because he played in church, and he did it all by ear, like playing with the choir, and he just played gospel stuff every time he came into school, and I would always have him show me these chords that he was doing, and he would always show me basically the chords that I'm playing for you. It was like, he was really influential on me early on as far as like developing my affinity for R&B music. But back to these chords. So the C minor chord, again, putting that dissonance in the middle, and then the second chord might be a, the third chord might be a, So that's really just a 3-chord turnaround. You said 4. You got your C chord, your F chord. I like putting these 2 notes together or these 2 notes together. In this case, I wouldn't do this, I would do this. And the reason is, and when I say this, I'm talking about this G sharp and this A sharp, is because here I have a major second, here I have a minor second. So I'm trying to introduce some variation, some subtle variation. Because if I just played the same chord, that's a little boring to me. If I played, that has a better flavor to me. I could do all 3, or do the 2 together to really thicken it up, but sorry, let's see. Yeah, see. That 3rd chord, and when I came back to that C, I didn't play it the same way. This is the original way that I played it. This is the second way that I played it. You saw that I did this. I do that a lot, where I'm basically grace noting the C. And also on here, I'm not just blocking it, I'm rolling it. So rather than playing it all at once, roll your chords. Roll them down or roll them up. I like to roll up. You can roll them down. But I think rolling up from the bottom works better because the first note that the listener is hearing is the bass note, which is the foundation of the chord. If you start from the top down, that's not the root, so it's a little more unsettling. But you could do that from time to time. So, but that's basically how I'd approach like a 3 or 4 chord turnaround in the key of C minor. So hopefully that answers the question. You don't have to learn all your scales, but if you're going to go perform this stuff, I highly recommend that you learn scales because you got to get that muscle memory in your hands. But anyway, so we're in the key of F, right? So those kinds of licks are all coming from the F blues minor scale. So, and that's true in any key, right? If I took that to a B flat, now that's obviously blues, which doesn't really, I mean, if you started playing a solo like that on a hip hop track, I mean, I don't know, maybe you'll be the next Lil Nas X or something, but the idea there is basically to come up with a foundation that you can build on. And I think the blues scale is a great way to start. So, you know, just if you can read music, go to like images.google.com and search F blues scale, G blues scale, you know, B flat blues scale, whatever, and print out the sheet and just play through the scales, get them under your finger, and then figure out how to make it sound less bluesy and more hip hop, more jazz, more R&B. So I think that's all I'll show you about that F blues. So maybe we should go into our first example here, and then I'll show you some of the intervals and some of the other things we talked about on the second slide as far as like how it relates to music theory. So I mentioned Jeff Lorber. He's a jazz fusion artist that was popular he still is popular. He's still touring. He had a song called Rain Dance that all these artists, these hip hop artists, if you go to whosampled.com and put in Jeff Lorber Rain Dance, you know, this isn't even a comprehensive list of the artists that have sampled that or interpolated that track. And one of the more famous ones is probably the Lil' Kim Crush on You. Maybe the SWV track. Mariah Carey did it recently with a No-No. Soul Live, which is like a funk group, they did it. And then the Dog Pound on their Christmas album did it, but that's obviously nobody probably remembers that one. It wasn't a very good version if you ask me, but I picked this up just by listening to this track and I know what these chords are. So I'm going to play the sequence for you one time and then we'll dive into the details. So it goes like this. So that's the sequence, right? So I'll show you one by one the chords. So I mentioned F sharp minor is the key that we're in. So if you take the triad of F sharp minor, it looks like that. So you've got an F sharp, an A C sharp, and another F sharp to round it out. So the only thing I've done differently with that first chord is put another F sharp down here. But instead of having an F sharp up here, I've got an E on the top. And now that turns this chord into, still got this F sharp minor triad, and I've added this E up here, doubled the F sharp bass, and this is an F sharp minor 7 chord. And the reason this is a 7 chord is because if I count the elements of the F sharp scale, the 7th is the E. So I'll show you what I mean by that. F sharp is 1, G sharp is 2, A is 3, B is 4, C is 5, D is 6, and 7 is E. And the 8th is, or we commonly don't call it the 8th, but you're starting over again up here at this F sharp. So it's a 7 chord because I haven't played a straight F sharp minor, I've added the 7th. So that's how we get at that. So the first chord is that F sharp minor 7. Now this chord, chord number 2, is a little more complex. Right, there's where your R&B really comes in, especially when you put that kind of stuff at the top. I hope you guys can hear this okay. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit in case you can't. So that first chord was this F sharp minor. Here's the second chord. And when you're figuring out chords, the key, the critical piece, the critical component is to look at the bass note, because 9 times out of 10, that's what the chord is going to be. And in this case, it is. It's an E chord. It's an E minor chord. So if I take E, G, and B, that's an E minor chord. This is an E major chord. Remember, I was talking about economy of motion earlier. So going from E minor to E major, all you do is you take the third, which is the middle note, and raise it to the black key, G sharp. So I went from a G to a G sharp and back to a G. But in this case, I'm not doing that. I'm just keeping it as a straight E minor chord, right? So E minor chord, again, I've added that 7th, because now this is the 7th of the E. So earlier, that previous chord, the 7th of the F sharp chord was that E right there. Well, now we have E as the bass. The 7th is this D right here. So this is a very common sound, right? You've heard this a bunch of times. And maybe when you're writing music, you're writing, you're kind of picking out chords like that and maybe not really understanding what they are. But so hopefully this will help you. But so you've got this E minor chord, add the 7th on the top. So again, if we count, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or sorry, the C sharp, 7. So your E minor 7 chord. And I actually doubled the B down here because I think it sounds a little thicker. I like that. But the thing I did different on this chord was I added this note. And you can take it even farther and add this note. Really extend it out, right? Like that's basically, I'm using all of my fingers to play that. I can't even play another note if I wanted to unless I use my thumb to press 2 notes at once. So that E minor chord, again, break it down into pieces to try to understand it. The root is the E, and this is a minor chord. So we've got E, G, and B. We added the 7th right here, and then we added up here what's called the 9th. And the reason that's the 9th is because if we count, again, from E to E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, this is a 9. So in jazz, that's called a 9 chord. So this is an E minor 9 chord. This is your minor portion. There's the 7th, but we're not going to call it the 7th because the top note is the 9th. It just happens to include the 7th element in there. You could add that to make it a little more full. You could add that, And then I was adding this A way at the top to make it real full. So again, chord number 1, which I actually forgot to mention, I wasn't playing that correctly. That's how it should have been played. I was playing it like this. So the key difference is you can see that G sharp is what's making this one sound. You have this minor dissonance right here. You have what's called a minor second. So if you play them together, it sounds dissonant, which is the point. So this chord is a F sharp minor 7 chord, but I've added the 9th. So I could have put the 9th up here. It's a G sharp. I could put it up top, or I could put it down low. I like it down low because I want that dissonance. If I put it up high, it's also dissonant, but it's a different kind of dissonance. I like it when it's clustered together like that. So, and if I add that B, it sounds even more rich, right? So this is chord 1. Here's chord 2. That E minor 9. Oops, sorry. Here's chord number 3. So what's this one all about? We can't even find a triad here, right? I mean, technically, this is the triad. And let me show you why that is. So normally, we might have a chord like that, which is a G major triad in the middle with an A in the bass and an F sharp up high here. But what I've done is actually, instead of this chord, I've done this. And you can see how it resolves, right? That's how it wants to resolve. So that's like a classical resolution in terms of that chord. But so this chord, again, look at your bass note. You've got the A in the bass. This is the 7th element of the A scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And instead of doing a G chord with an A in the bass, I'm dropping that D to a C sharp or a D flat, but in this case it's called a C sharp. And I'm adding this F sharp, which gives it a lot of color. You can do that too, and it resolves here, right? You can feel that movement. So that's very jazzy, obviously, and you get into kind of like smooth jazz world, straight ahead bebop jazz, R&B, all those type of things is going on just in that little couple of chords there. So again, from the beginning, we've got chord number 1, chord number 2, chord number 3, which is that A. Now it has to go here. Because this really can't go anywhere else other than the D. It just sounds right. And that's because it's a 5 to a 1. I won't get into the details of why that's called a 5 to a 1, but safe to say, this is a D major 7 chord, right? So from the bottom up, I've got the 1st element, the 5th element, the 3rd, the 5th again, the major 7th, and the 9th. So you might wonder, why is that C sharp called a major 7th? So if I take the D scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or back to 1, this is the 7th element. And I'm adding that B, just because I like the way that sounds. So again, chord 1, chord 2, chord 3, chord 4. So now we only got 2 more chords to go. So this is where it gets a little interesting. That's where we're going, right? So what's this? G sharp in the bass, F sharp is the 7th of that G sharp chord. And I've got a minor 3rd here. So if it was a major 3rd, it would be this. But it's a minor 3rd. So this is a G sharp diminished chord. So we haven't talked about diminished and augmented yet. So if I take, let's take G sharp minor, and let's diminish the fifth. And what diminishment is movement downwards. So taking the fifth and moving it downwards is diminishing it. Taking the fifth and moving it upward could be seen as augmentation, but not really in this case, because what that actually did was change the chord. So what we did there was take a G minor and turn it into an E major first inversion. So we haven't talked about inversions yet either, but I think really in the interest of time tonight, I'm just kind of glossing over things. After this, if you guys have more questions about this type of stuff, just hit me up on Instagram and we'll talk it through. But if I was to raise this, that's an E first inversion, because here's my E chord, first inversion of E, second inversion of E, and back to my E major chord. So that's diminished in the fact that you've heard this sound before, right? That's a diminished chord. What that means is basically everything is a minor third. So G sharp to B is a minor third, B to D is a minor third, D to F is a minor third, F to A flat is a minor third, and then back again, A flat to B, and keep going up the line, right? It's like that, you know, famous cinematic harp dream scene, right? They use a diminished chord usually in those things. So augmented is the opposite of that, but there's not an augmented chord in this phrase, so we won't probably show that. But so this is a G sharp diminished chord. That's our final chord right there before we turn around back to this F sharp. And that's called a C sharp, and it has what's called a tritone in there. So tritone is another music theory concept, and it's delineated by the fact that it's not a perfect fourth, but it's an augmented fourth, or you could think of it as a perfect fifth diminished, right? So here's your perfect fifth. So if you took F as an example, from F to C is a perfect fifth, from C to F is a perfect fourth. If you took the bottom part, which is a perfect fifth, and you diminish it, that's a tritone. So taking another example, let's take A, perfect fifth, perfect fourth. Take a look at your perfect fifth again, diminish it. Now you have a tritone. That's how you arrive at a tritone, right? And one thing that's kind of cool to do with tritones is walk them down. So like this. Right, that's another. And if you stacked up your chord, if you took like, let's see. Right, you can do like cool things, especially with MIDI. All you have to do is draw one diminished chord, and you can copy those three notes up a half step, copy them up a half step again, half step again, half step again, you know what I'm saying? So that's the nice thing about if you're not that good of a keyboard player and you don't feel very confident in your playing, take your MIDI and copy it. You know, you have your diminished or your tritone chord right there, just copy it to another tritone chord somewhere else and see if the two things fit together. So anyway, back to that chord. I like to add that A, thicken it up again, but that's a tritone is the main thing I wanted to show there. So, and it brings us back to the F sharp. So again, stepping through the chords, F sharp, minor 7, E, minor 9, A7, with some diminished characteristics there because I dropped that D to a C sharp, to this D, major 7. The G sharp, let's see, that's the G sharp 7 chord, and then our tritone chord, which is a C sharp chord. Takes us right back to the F sharp. So that's it. That's Jeff Lorber Rain Dance. Like I said, it's played in all those different tracks that we listened to earlier. You should go to, I'll send you a list, or if you go to whosampled.com, if you want to listen to all these, it's these first 6 in this list here. I can send you the names of them. Check them out, and then go on YouTube and pull up Jeff Lorber Rain Dance, and you can hear the original. I think I've actually got it on vinyl around here somewhere, but I don't have my stuff hooked up for you. but that's that track.